If you don't learn how to do this, you can end up paying the consequences. My name is Tayson, I'm the founder here at Outdoor Vitals, and today we're gonna be talking about how to repair this. Believe me, knowing how to repair a sleeping pad on trail can save you from a horrible night in the backcountry. In fact, I've had 2 experiences in a row where I've had deflating sleeping pads, and one of them was definitely prominent on this YouTube channel, where I ended up having to hike out because it was an unrepairable pad. Now, that was a very unique situation where there was actually glue on the inside of the valve that made it unrepairable, but everything else should be pretty repairable, barring a gash so big that you just gotta give up and hike out. I want you to stay warm, comfortable, and sleep through the night on trail to be able to just quickly repair your pads if you were to ever damage them. Now, I say if because hopefully you don't have this kind of stuff happen to you. Some of this is quite avoidable. This pad right here is one that I often am using when I'm trying to get super, super light or in the winter seasons, shoulder seasons. And one of the things that I do is I double it up with our Outdoor Vitals 1/8 inch foam pad. This gives a little bit more protection underneath the pad from debris or anything that might give it a pinprick hole, as well as locks it into place inside the tent so it's not sliding around. Now, if you want this 1/8 inch foam pad, you can get that on outdoorvitals.com. If you're a UL member, you can get this at a bigger discount. Now, pitch over, let's talk about repairing this thing. So step 1 is analyze how fast your pad is leaking. If it has a leak that you don't know about, you can't see it, but it's leaking quite fast, you may just simply want to listen to your pad to start out. If you can't hear it and you don't know where it is, go to step 2, which is to apply water. Now, there's a lot of ways you can apply water. You could get a water bottle and spread some water on this. If you're by a creek, you could also try to submerge it in a creek and find those pinprick holes. Or if you're here, you may just happen to have a spray bottle and you can spray this on the pad. Let's go ahead and blow this up and look for the hole. All right, so we've got this blown up. Let's go ahead and apply water. I always recommend you apply water first to the valve area. That way you can check and see if the valve is leaking or if there's just anything right around the valve. And I've already done that with this pad because I follow that principle. I literally sprayed 1 spray on this pad and found the leak right away when I first was looking. Right there, you should be able to see that, those bubbles. I literally first spray, got that down. I always start by the valve because sometimes it'll leak around the valve. Right here, you've got this hard plastic piece, and what it's actually done is it's just worn a pinprick hole right there in that crease. All right, so you're gonna wanna go ahead and dry this off to the best of your ability. The more dry that is, the better this is all going to adhere. And you're also going to want to deflate the pad. It's gonna be really hard to patch that with this much air in it, so I'm gonna go ahead and let the air back out of this pad, so that I can make this much more flat and repairable. But again, I'm gonna wipe that off and kind of blow on and try to get it as dry as I possibly can. So at this point, you're probably asking, what do I need to repair a sleeping pad? And the easiest answer is this field repair kit. It has everything in it that you need. It's very simple, and I carry one of these at all times on trail with me, and I use it, trust me, multiple trips in a row. This is another thing you can get on a discount with the membership. So this is all it is. It's super, super light. And inside of here, you're gonna have a few important things. Number 1, you get the seam grip. This is basically the glue that you can put on here. Now, some people will use this to patch pinprick holes, but the next thing you can do, here's your applicator brush as well, is you can use these patches inside of here to add another layer. So that's actually what I'm gonna do. While I probably could get away with just adding this to the pinprick hole and sealing that off, I'm going to apply a little bit of a patch on top of this. The other thing that's really nice is they give you this little tiny piece here, which is a field repair guide. And so you can open this up and it's gonna give you some instructions on how to patch things. So if you've got this, you also have a little bit of knowledge inside of here, which I do like to keep these with my kit. All right, so step 1 is we're going to apply this seam grip. So opening it up, you will notice that it is actually sealed, and you will need something sharp to poke it with, such as a pocket knife. I do a super small hole. A lot of times these have a little bit of pressure, especially where we're at slightly higher elevation. And sure enough, it's gonna start coming out just a little bit. So be very careful with that. And then I'm just gonna take this brush right here, get a little tiny bit on it, and brush it onto the pad. Now, typically, if you can mark this, that's also helpful. Make sure you're getting it right on the spot that you need it. But this is such a small little hole, and it was right on a crease, so I could remember that. Sometimes these feel like they're one-time use. If you're near water, maybe you can try to rinse that out, but be careful, this is super sticky stuff, especially if you're doing it in the field. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and cut a tiny patch to go over the top of that just to reinforce it. Again, I don't think it's actually needed. Maybe I could even do 2 small coats of this and that would be slightly better. That is an option. If you had a leak right here, let's say on this seam where just it's a connection with the valve, what you would do is you would just use this stuff to cake it on there, maybe even do 2 layers, let it cure for a few minutes and then put it on there. This does take a little while to cure, a couple hours preferably. It may be ideal if you know you've got a slow leak in a pad to try to patch it during the day, maybe when you're crossing a creek, and you can use the creek to also locate the hole. Anyways, now we're gonna go ahead and cut this to size. What you're gonna wanna do is cut it bigger than the hole or the space that you're trying to fill so it has plenty of space to adhere. Now, if I had a bigger gash in here, it's a little bit harder to patch it, but you pretty much are only limited to size of the amount of tape that you have. That's also one of the reasons that I also typically carry a Gerber dime in the field. It's a small multi-tool, weighs a couple of ounces, but I get a knife, I get a pair of scissors, tweezers, things like that with that tool, and I have used the scissors on that for cutting tape. All right, so one of the things you do want to do is typically round off the corners. It just helps it not get snagged or brushed and start to pick away at this. You can also use a typical knife or razor blade for this. I will typically lay this on a log and just cut the corners exactly how I want them. So this should be about right. I'm gonna go ahead and pick this off and stick it on the pad now. You will notice I'm putting it right on top of that sealant. This is a totally acceptable thing to do. That sealant will adhere to this as well as the pad fabric. I'm just gonna go ahead and really kind of work it in with my fingers, generate a little bit of heat that will help it bond as well. Make sure you get any air pockets out of there that you can. It's a very awkward spot to have to patch this, which I've found to be very true in the field. It's typically where you least want to have a hole, is right where it's gonna create a hole for you. So that's on there. Now, if this was a bigger hole and it was especially in the middle, what you'd wanna do is put about 50% of the air back in the pad. You don't wanna stretch it or have it like tight, but you also don't want to have, like if it was a bigger hole in the middle over here, you wouldn't want this seam grip glue to seal it to the backside and have you have basically a spot that's stuck together. That's why putting a little bit of air back in the pad can be helpful. This location, it's really not a factor. It's right where it's sticking together anyway, so I don't need to put any additional air in here, but just know that you might, depending on the location, so that it doesn't stick to the other side of the pad. So the last step in the process is to allow that seam grip glue time to cure. Now it can take 8 to 12 hours to cure, so obviously if you're doing this at home, you'll have ample amount of time. If you're doing this in the field, if you can do something like that more in the day, let it cure enough to not be super sticky, and then let it cure longer while you're hiking, that's a great option. I know when I did it in the field, I needed to essentially apply it, and then I waited about an hour before kind of testing its integrity. But obviously the more time you can give it, the better. So that is how you repair a pad. If you wanna see my miserable night where I had to get up and pack out, we'll drop a link right here. So click that, watch that video, it's a good time. And with that, we'll see you guys out on the trail, hopefully now more prepared.